Hey everyone, welcome to our fifth Dev Town Hall. I have Adam Dossa here with me. He's just back from his EDCON presentation. He's going to go over to do a recap on that presentation in a few minutes. As you all know, this Dev Town Hall meeting is supposed to be a space where, well, we the developers of Polymath, we can share our latest news, our developments, share any new features that we are working on with the community. So hopefully you find this space useful. I'm going to go over some of our latest updates in a second. Then for today, Adam is going to do his recap on the presentation that he did at EDCON Toronto last week, and then we are also opening the space for some questions or any comments that you might have from my presentation last week, where we went over the process of registering a token symbol and deploying a token on Polymath's Toro release. So feel free to ask any questions on the chat here or on the question section, so we can go over that later today. Hey Adam.
Hi. So
go ahead.
I'll dive in. So thanks for the introduction, Pablo. So as Pablo mentioned, we kind of gave this talk on modular security tokens at EDCON last weekend in Toronto. So really, I'm going to recap the talk a little bit now, and then I think we tweeted a link to the talk in the live stream, and I think EDCON will be kind of chopping up the talks and publishing them separately as well. So we'll obviously share links on the kind of social media channels when we have those to the talk itself and to the slides. But really, so the talk kind of covered two main areas. One was related to the ST20 standard, and the other area was related to modular security tokens. So the ST20 standard is a kind of clean, simple interface which extends from ERC20, so built on top of ERC20, but provides a kind of couple more features which are specific to security tokens as opposed to utility tokens. With those features, so there's kind of one feature to allow people to validate transfers online, or on chain rather, I should say, and another, the other kind of set of features is to do with making tokens a bit more consistent in the way that makes security tokens more consistent in the way that new tokens are created and destroyed. So the ST20 interface is available in our GitHub in the usual place, and it's a standard we think makes sense to build on in terms of security tokens. In addition to the kind of ST20 standard, we also talked a little bit about what modular security tokens are. So at a kind of really high level, a modular security token is a sort of simple ST20 compliant security token, and so the issuer starts with that very simple ST20 security token, and they can then add new token functionality, which we call modules, over time. So there are modules for fundraising, modules for restricting transfers, modules for dividends and voting and permissions and various other things. So those modules can be added to the token, over time by the issuer, which obviously kind of gives them a nice flexible approach to securitizing their assets on chain. So in terms of the town hall, one thing we want to get across is that building modules in the Polymath ecosystem is pretty straightforward. If you're a Solidity developer and you have a kind of great idea for some functionality that'd be relevant for security tokens, like maybe a clever way of doing governance or dividends, you can take that idea, wrap it up as obviously implement it in Solidity, and then wrapping that up as a Polymath module is pretty straightforward. And the idea is that once you've done that, you could start charging fees in Poly for 2 issuers who wanted to use your module. So along with the kind of EDCON talk, we just published, I think last night or this morning, a article on the Polymath blog, which kind of goes through step by step how to create a new module in the Polymath ecosystem with some code samples and all that kind of fun stuff. So, definitely if you're a developer, check out the article, check out the code base, and we're obviously happy to answer. You can reach out to myself or to Pablo or to really anyone on the team. We're happy to answer any kind of technical questions you have or any questions like that you have. I think maybe it's one of the future town halls we'll do some sort of live walkthrough of the kind of process to create a new module. So we'll definitely announce that when we do it. So that was the EDCON talk. There were a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. So a guy called Philippe Castonguay published a article on Medium, I think a few weeks ago now, which was a really kind of interesting and kind of novel approach to create sort of off-chain whitelists. So the idea is that if you're running an ICO, so this is from his blog post, the idea is that if you're an issuer and you're running an ICO, rather than the issuer maintaining the whitelist, instead the issuer, if everyone, once an investor has gone through the kind of KYC process, the issuer would provide a little blob of data which represents a signature from the issuer, which allows the investor to invest, and that blob of data would be passed by the investor to the ICO and validated on chain by the smart contract when they wanted to buy tokens. So it's kind of, we thought it was a really interesting way of kind of scaling out whitelists, sort of distributing or decentralizing whitelists a little bit. So we've kind of adapted that concept of that idea to the Polymath concept of transfer managers, which are kind of the modules that control who can buy and transfer security tokens. So there's now in the general transfer manager, there's now a facility that allows the issuer, rather than the issuer kind of maintaining the whitelist on chain, there's a facility for the issuer to instead provide the investor this kind of little blob of signed data, where the data that's signed by the issuer represents all of the transfer restrictions that apply to the investor, and the investor can send that blob of data to the transfer manager contract and effectively add themselves, whitelist themselves on the transfer manager contract, provided that obviously that whitelist matches the signed bit of data that the issuer provided. So it's a way of sort of flipping around the idea that the issuer has kind of full responsibility for maintaining the whitelist and kind of distributing that out, and putting it in investors' hands to add themselves to the whitelist rather than it all going through the issuer. So we put together a kind of implementation for that in the general transfer manager if issuers want to go down that route. So again, that code is in our kind of obviously public, and we have this ongoing bug bounty. So as always, there's a good chance to review the code and try to kind of win some of those bounties. So I think those, so those were the main updates from my side.
Okay, all right, thank you, Adam. So besides this addition of the off-chain whitelisting capabilities that Adam mentioned, we have also been working on some other new features. I'm going to go over a few of them, and well, Adam, if you like, you can also add something to this. Weeks we have been working with internally with our team and speaking with different issuers and advisors and attorneys, and we have found that there are some new features that we should add to our contract. So we've been working on that, and that will be released in the next few weeks with the new release of our protocol. Some of the features that we have been adding are, for example, the ability to make the tokens divisible or indivisible. We did that by adding a granularity parameter that allows the owner of the token to select which kind of token they want, and they could even change that later on if they realize that they now want a token to be divisible or not. So basically, what this does is at the token level, if the token is indivisible and a transfer would cause a non-round token transfer, that transaction will basically revert. It will fail. The other thing that we added is the ability for the issuer to add some sort of KYC expiration date to the whitelist on the General Transfer Manager. So given some regulatory requirements, investors, depending on the jurisdiction and well, regulatory requirements, investors might have to do a new KYC process every year or every now and then. So the new feature will allow the issuer to basically select an expiration date for the KYC check. So no matter if the transfer should be allowed because the investor is on the whitelist and they don't have any lockup dates at that moment, the transaction might fail because they need to redo their KYC process. Some other feature that we added is the possibility for limiting the amount of token holders that a token might have. Some regulatory requirements dictate that a token shouldn't have more than certain amount of token holders at any given point. So the issuer will now be able to set a cap on the amount of investors, and they will be able to modify that if they wanted later on. The other thing that we are working on, which will be available for the next release, is limiting the amount of tokens investors could have. So this is another requirement that came up in our conversation. So basically, the feature will allow the issuer to set a percentage of tokens that it's the cap that any given investor may have in tokens. So basically, if this cap is set to, let's say, 20% of the total supply, no investor may hold, no shareholder, no token holder may have more than 20% of the cap, unless the issuer manually approves them. And we are also adding the ability for the issuer to freeze or pause trades across different transfer managers that the token may have. So, for example, if they are trading, if the tokens are trading on a particular exchange, and there's a problem with exchange, or the issuer is no longer happy with that exchange, or for some reason they have to pause trading for some time, the issuer may be able to freeze to prevent trades from happening on that exchange. And the issuer also has the ability to freeze transfers across all transfer managers. So basically, they could, for some reason, they could elect to stop trading because of a major issue or whatever. So if they do that, trades can no longer happen, and then they can, of course, they can unfreeze the transfers once that issue has been solved. So these are the most important features that we are working on, and that will be released within the next the next release in a couple of weeks. Adam, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that captures it all. I think, as you say, the plan is to do a new release around the middle of next week, I think, with all these features in. Yep, I think that's a great summary.
Okay, awesome. So the last thing that we wanted to cover today is, so as you know, last week I did this walkthrough of how to deploy a security token on Polymath's Toro release. Last week we didn't have much time to do any questions. So if you guys have any questions regarding the process that I followed, if any of you want to share a token that you deploy, we can do so and go over that. Otherwise, we can call it a day. By the way, next week we are releasing an article with part 2, which is how to take that token that we deployed last week and how to whitelist existing shareholders or even investors and mint tokens for them. And then later on we'll release part 3, which is all about deploying, launching an STO, a security token offering, and allowing investors to buy tokens from the offering. So given that next week we'll release part 2, and probably the following week we'll do a similar walkthrough live with me. If you guys have any questions regarding part 1, and if you got stuck, we can help you get unstuck.
So I think one other thing I noticed, I think Charles St. Louis, I think, asked a question on the chat about what the options will be for STOs. So what different types of security token offerings there will be. I think that the only which was answered in the chat, but just to kind of build on top of that answer, I think it's a good. It's kind of a good example of where the modular design for security tokens comes in. So the idea is that all these STOs are just modules that you can add to your security token. So, so Polymath will kind of provide some basic, kind of capped crowd sales and some basic options for STOs. But if you're an issuer, or in fact, if you're a developer who wants to build, a more kind of useful, or like a more kind of complex or interesting type of security token offering that you think will be useful for issuers, then you can definitely go ahead and build that as a module, and as I say, attach a fee in Poly. And if it's an STO that the issuers find attractive and want to use, then obviously as a developer that would be kind of a great way of getting involved in the code base. So it's a good example of where modules are used in the system are for giving really kind of unlimited types of flexibility to what types of STOs issuers can use. They can choose from the kind of Polymath list, they can choose from, they can obviously develop new modules in-house, or they can, obviously other third-party developers can put together modules which can be used by issuers.
Right. If you guys look at our repository, right now we have these models, and within this models folder, I guess you can see my screen. And within the STO model, we have a few STOs that we created. By no means these STOs are so general purpose that everyone would be able to use them. As you know, STOs, crowd-side contracts are quite complex, or can get quite complex, and well, there's no one single smart contract that could cater to every single possible variation of a crowd-side out there. So what we have right now, this cat STO and most likely examples of what can be achieved and how you can build your own STOs, but we expect either developers doing their own races to come up with their own STOs contracts, or over time the development community to build them and offer them to the rest of the community, as well as we could also build our own smart contracts and offer them to issuers. We had a question. Oh, we don't have it anymore. Okay.
Yeah, so, I think there's a question on who sets the price of an STO, which is, and the answer is each issuer would kind of configure. Each issuer would configure the STO appropriately, so with the price and the cap and all those other, the start date and end date and all those sorts of details would be set by the issuer.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Does anyone want to share their the token that they deployed? As you can see, okay, we have a question.
Yeah. So there's a question from Adam Gould asking, how is a module added to an STO contract? So it's a good question. I mean, the answer is that so how is a module added to an STO contract? Okay, so maybe then just to be super clear, so an STO is STO stands for security token offering. An STO is a module. So the idea is that you have a security token, which is just the kind of basic ST20 compliant token, and then you add modules like STO modules onto that security token. So the security token has a function called add module, which I think is on the screen that Pablo is sharing at the moment.
Right.
So you'd effectively, if you want to add a module to your security token, like an STO module, for example, you would call add module and pass in the kind of details of the module you want to add. There's some parameters that kind of explain there, but you would add pass in effectively the details of the module you wanted to add to your security token, and that module could be an STO module if you're doing fundraising, or it could be a dividend module or a governance module or whatever else. So that's how modules are added to, and obviously the issuer gets to decide which modules they want to add to their security token, depending on obviously what the requirements are of that issuer. So I mean, Adam, if that doesn't make sense, feel free to follow up with a new question.
So yeah, as Adam mentioned, security token. The security token contract has, as you can see in this diagram here on my screen, the security token contract has this method to allow the issuer, the owner of the contract, to add further modules to it. There are several types of modules that can be added to the security token. Some of them deal with transfer restrictions. Those are the transfer manager modules. Some other modules deal with permissions, so the issuer can set permissions on certain actions, methods, so other actors can execute those transactions. Like, for example, they could allow, let's say, a KYC provider or a legal delegate to work on their own whitelist with some other account. And then the other type of module that security token allows to be attached right now are the STOs, which could be, well, anything that the issuer could think of. You could have capped STOs, you could have refundable STOs, you could have STOs with different bonus schemes, and well, as you know, there are tens or even hundreds of different STOs and permutations on how those can be configured. Thank you, Adam. Gal. Any other questions?
Just saw one question come up saying, can different modules be applied to clients based on their location, e.g. having one set of security rules for the US and one for Europe? It's a good question. So I guess really here the question is, can an issuer have different transfer restrictions based on whether the investor is in the US or in Europe and so on? So there is some flexibility to set. I mean, so certainly you can set different transfer restrictions, obviously based on different Ethereum addresses, and you could derive those transfer restrictions depending on the jurisdiction or whatever of the investor. In terms of whether you can have different modules attached, I mean, the short answer is at the moment, no. You know, modules attached to the security token, kind of regardless of who the investors are. But I guess the module itself could enforce some logic where maybe it only allowed, you know, say US investors to interact with it or something like that. But that logic isn't part of the security token itself at the moment. That would kind of have to be built into the sort of specific module. But you know, certainly, you know, it'd be possible to have, I'm not sure if this would make sense, but you know, it'd be possible to have like an STO module aimed at, say, US investors and a different STO module aimed at European investors with slightly different logic. But the modules themselves would have to kind of try to check whether, you know, what the jurisdiction of the investor was.
Yeah, I guess you could also have like different transfer manager models. Each transfer manager model would have its own whitelist that the issuer would manually say, okay, I want this transfer manager model to only deal with US-based investors, and this other transfer manager model only to deal. I want this to deal only with, let's say, European investors, and then you could have different sets of rules for each type of investor, I guess.
Yeah. And then there's one more question that came in from CT that says, what is the difference between a transfer and permission module? Which one handles AMLKYC component authorization? So it's a good question. So in terms of where the kind of AMLKYC stuff lives, that's really on the transfer manager side, so the transfer manager modules. The permission module is more kind of general purpose. So the permission module allows you to give, in general, to kind of delegate access to, you know, various types of admin functionality, either on the security token or on modules attached to the security token to other people. So if you have, you know, if you get, let's say you have a developer who's working for you, or, you know, maybe a legal person or something who's working for you, you can kind of give their Ethereum address, various types of permission to your security token or to modules attached to your security token. And you can define different types of access. You know, there's kind of like an ACL type approach. You can define different types of access and kind of flexibly give people, you know, other, effectively grant other Ethereum addresses different types of access to your security token or modules attached to your security token. So that's the kind of, that's what the permission module does. And then the transfer modules are for kind of enforcing all these kind of KYC, AML type requirements.
Yeah, the permission model is more like granting access to some parts of the issuance process to, let's say, some employee of yours, another founder, or even an external party, so they can help you manage certain parts of the issuance process without having to, well, give them access to your own Ethereum private key, which you would never do. So basically, the issuer, the person, the account that starts the issuance, they are the owner of these contracts, of the, let's say, the mainly of the security token contract. So if that person wanted someone to help them with the process, let's say, I don't know, a data entry guy working with the whitelist, moving addresses into the whitelist, uploading files or some other documentation, they would need some permissions in order to do that. So this permission model takes care of that. It will allow the issuer to on certain functions to other addresses. So there's another question from CT. How would this chart be modified if token has a cross-exchange trading compatibility? For example, being able to trade on Templum and TCO. So basically, the way this has been built is, by default, you get this transfer manager model, which takes care of a couple of things. First, it has an internal whitelist which manages who can buy tokens from the STO, basically. And then it also applies some transfer restrictions for secondary markets. So if you wanted to, if you have some tokens and you want to trade them, you want to sell them to some other account, the transfer manager model makes sure that both the buyer and the seller are on this whitelist, so they are clear to buy and sell this token, and that there's no lockup period applying on both of them. So the buyer is actually able to buy tokens. They don't have any restrictions, and the seller is able to sell those tokens. Then, if you wanted these tokens to trade on some centralized or decentralized exchange, you would have to work with another transfer module which deals with exchanges. Especially on centralized exchanges, you would work with these. Let me show you. So here on contracts, we have an example implementation of how this transfer model would look like. On transfer managers, we have the general transfer manager, which is the transfer manager that I just went over, and the other one is the exchange transfer manager, which basically once attached to the security token, it will check that the transfer is coming from this exchange, and it's going to an account that has been whitelisted in this particular exchange. So you could have different exchange transfer models for each one of the exchanges that you are working with, you are being listed on, and each one of these exchange transfer managers, they would have their own whitelist with the accounts that they are allowed to send transfers to or receive transfers from. Okay. Any other questions regarding the modularity of Polymath or the process of deploying a token? Okay. Adam, anything you would like to add?
No, not from my side, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining. We announce when the next dev town hall is. Stay tuned for the next article part 2 of how to deploy a security token on Polymath. That's coming up next week. Thank you.
Thanks.